she sent me her game worn boot from the championship game. And that's cool. As a coach, I mean, that goes right in my office at the university. But it means so much more than, ooh, I won a national championship. That's great, and I've gotten rings from universities I've worked at, but the story behind that shoe, really cool. Ironically, it's the same foot that she tore the ACL
on. Welcome to TSP. I'm your host, Matt Thomas. I'm joined by Dr. Brad Leshinske, and he is the man who does everything under the sun, or at least that is something I continually ask myself the more we chat. After our first 2-hour phone call, I've come and watched him coach, and he was just everywhere and chatting with me and coaching and doing everything at the same time. And he's another product of just a simple Insta DM whenever you reached out to me and we chatted for a while. But he got his PhD from Rocky Mountain University. He's the director of performance at Laurence High School, which is outside Chicago. He has owned and sold his own business. He's the director of the exercise science department at Xavier University. He's got some little ones running around of his own. He's on the board of the NSCA Sports Science and the CSCS as well. He's the VP of the Rugby SIG of the NSCA. So the more we chat, the more I just ask myself, like, I have no idea how you do all this. So I'm super excited to have you on, and we will hop right into it. Hopefully I did you justice, but how are you doing? And what is the first/biggest story of your career that kind of set you on this path you're on?
Man, first off, thanks for having me. I listen to the podcast. You do a great job. I love the condense of the podcast and getting right into it, because I think, a lot of podcasts get drawn out, right? So I appreciate it. I appreciate the work you do for TC, man. You do a great job. Your whole facility and team do an excellent job. So what has really got me on the path? Well, weird, right? I got fired. That is the biggest. Whoa. And I got fired twice, and I think, as a young coach, I was 25 when I got fired the first time, right? I was working for a company named TP Sports Performance, working with a lot of the area high school kids. And we were in the midst of opening up the Bo Jackson Dome, which is very popular in the western suburbs out by Lockport. And we also had a facility in Evergreen Park. Walked into work one day, and, the owner was like, "Hey, can you sit down?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Do you want to buy the business from me, this location?" I was like, "How much?" He said, $75,000. I said, "Can't afford it." He's like, "You're fired." Like, all right. So put me in a position of, as the lead instructor there, lead head coach. We didn't really have distinctions and titles at that point in our careers. But, I had to make a choice. What am I going to do? And forging relationships as a young coach serves you well, because I was able to then open up my own business with a clientele ready to go. The failure of that owner is he wasn't present. He was an owner. Great coach, phenomenal throws coach, one of the best javelin throwers in the history of the United States. Phenomenal guy. So I never have to hold grudges against it. It was a learning opportunity, something that really set my path forward in owning my own company, learning how important it is to forge those relationships, because you never know when you got to lean on your network. The second time I got fired was after I moved back from Florida. I did a little bit of a stint in coaching in Florida and working for a good friend of mine that actually he launched his business within mine. And, he pulled me in the office one day, and I was the lead coach. So I had 22 coaches under me. And he said I just didn't fit his core values and what they were looking for. And so he let me go. And again, it put me at a crossroads. What do I do, right? Do I go work at a big box gym, or do I, what do I do? And at that time, I'm a little older. I'm in my mid 30s, and again, leaning on your network. One of my buddies called me and said, "Hey, I think you could reopen your company again. I think it's time for you to open and own." And he goes, "I don't mind helping you out." So again, it goes back to that networking. And some of the most important failures are the ones you grow the most from. And I think that's really key for young coaches. And I mention this often, as a leader, perceived leader, I lead the company, I lead, the athletes, I lead my students at the university. You have to allow people to safely fail. Without those failures, I would never have that path, put in front of me. And it definitely was not a paved path. There's always rocks, bumps. You got to lay your own foundation. You got to lay your own, network, and that's what you lean on.
I think the hardest thing about adulting, now that I guess I'm an adult, is that you don't have a box, and like you can literally make whatever box you want. So it's like, what do you do? Because normally it's, oh, well, you have to take these classes, and you're in class from August to May, and then you do these classes, and then you go to grad school, and then your PhD and da-da-da. But like you're adulting and like you get to make your own box. So I can only imagine like once you walked out of that first facility, you're like, I don't have box anymore. Like what could I could do anything. What could I possibly do? So that was kind of the first thing. And then the second thing was about the network. And that's a theme on TSP, is that jobs are gotten before they're even like a thing, you know?
Yeah.
And
it's
like,
a formality, you know?
Yeah, there's a very small percentage of jobs that happen from kind of just cold applying, you know, where it's you're good buddies with someone, and then one of their friends says, hey, do you know someone for this job? It's like, oh, I got a guy for you. Or it happens directly to you. So there's just so much to be said about first being a decent human being.
Yes, that is number one. Yes.
Being good at what you do and putting yourself out there, you know?
Yeah. And I think, you know, to your point, you know, even looking at, I love the NSCA, they do a phenomenal job, but it's really hard to get on their speaking tour. I do a lot, you know, with the NSCA and stuff, and I love it. I absolutely love it. I think they're a phenomenal organization, but I've only spoken at the state clinics. Like one of my big things is trying to get on that national stage. Just, it's a bucket list of mine, you know, it's like get at the national conference and try to present. And, you know, I put in for 3 or 4 and I've made it down to the top 5 to get in. I just haven't broken through. So it's always a constant reminder, you know, even though a network may be strong, it doesn't guarantee you, right? To your point. And, you know, and obviously to your point that the Division 1, 2s are very heavy in networking, specifically in the strength and conditioning field. And that's why the sports science field is so cool and kind of so new and gives so many more opportunities to scientists.
I guess next we'll kind of chat down that rabbit hole, is like, how does one get on the board of kind of all of sports science? How did you stumble upon sports science? And I guess we'll start with, what's your definition of sports science?
Well, the definition for me is looking at data, right? And capturing data and learning how to disseminate that and make sense, not only to what you're doing program wise, but to your other coaches. If you're a sports scientist or a lead scientist, you got to be able to take that data and explain it to the strength and conditioning coach and how to best implement it. And you also have to be very forthright and understanding that you can't just look at numbers. A lot of this stuff is also subjective data. I'll give you an example. If we're using, say, the FMS as an evaluation tool, right? We have, me and you are looking at somebody performing the overhead squat, right? Well, there's these parameters we got to follow with the FMS, but you might have a different observation than I do. They might score a 2 and a 2 with both of us there, but we know that there's definitely some room to improve with that movement, right? And that movement, that's where that programming comes in. Much like I use Hawken Dynamics, phenomenal force plates. We take all this data, and if we see something a little goofy, yeah, it might be a little off. Does that mean we're going to change the program 100%? No, we might want to capture a couple more jumps. So it's really taking that data and some concrete numbers and quantifiable numbers and taking it down and breaking it down to the coaches and then putting it to the program, and then also explaining it to the athlete, because I think it's really important. So again, disseminating that information, I think, is really key. And your second question is, how do you get involved? Very lucky. You know, my title at the university allows me to get into some cool things. Being a director of exercise science, sports and fitness administration, having the technology at the lab, and then also previously working and still working with the CSCS and doing their exam preps and things like that. You know, they kind of asked me, hey, would you mind helping out with this too? You know, of course. I think one of our greatest things as coaches is giving back and servicing our field. And I think that's hugely important to me. It's one of my core values, is giving back and service. And I try to align myself with like-minded schools and universities that also think serving is vitally important to the growth and maturation of our students and our profession.
Fantastic. So last kind of part about the intro of your story was getting fired down in Florida and then having to come back. So could we kind of just chat about kind of coming back to that business, kind of learning not only from the first time being fired, but also an experiment down in Florida, and having known what not to do? You know, I think that there's so much value in you speaking on the importance of failing safely, but learning how to fail, learning how to learn from failure, and kind of speaking on like coaching with other coaches and interns and stuff like that. It's like you have to empower them to go and do stuff, and sometimes they'll crush it and sometimes they won't. But kind of with your story, going back for it the second time, kind of what were the main things that you were in your mind, or the main lessons that you took away from the first 2 rounds?
I think the biggest thing is delegation and learning how to delegate, learning how to say no. Oftentimes coaches are big yes people. We want to appease everybody. We want to make the right decisions, the right calls, and get mixed with everything. You know, oftentimes people always ask me, how do you do so much stuff? You know, I have a great staff. I mean, you met my head coach, John, phenomenal coach, just a great coach, young guy, always learning, always, you know, put himself out there, great writer. It's learning how to delegate and trust. And it goes back to that safely failing, you know, and allowing them to learn. Being a great leader and being a leader at any point in time is trusting, delegating, and being there to mentor and catching them if they do fail or if they have questions. That's our job. So going the second time around, it was much more going into this, laying the foundation at a facility that I opened. Once that foundation was laid, have somebody to come and work and build that foundation up in their own right and give them their own code. I tell all my coaches they should have their own websites. They should have their own IG accounts. It's not about my company. It's about you as a coach and about our athletes. I love that Johnny has his own articles and he publishes, and I'm the first one to share, and previous coaches of mine, first one to share their businesses. It's hugely important to me. You got to have some autonomy. You can't be stuck in, hey, I work for Prime Time Sports Performance. I can only do their methodology. We all have different takes on things, you know. And it's really important. I let John program for football, program for the basketball team. He loves those sports. Why would I deny him that? I love football too. I played it. I love it. I played at a high level. It's great. But I'm not going to sit there and take it from him, because that's going to show him interest. That's going to show him I trust him with something that I love. And I think that goes hand in hand with a great relationship with your coaches. You know, up north, we have adversity volleyball. Phenomenal. I've trained and worked with their owners. And I put one of my, you know, minority business owners up there, Mo, who does a phenomenal job. He's the director of all the strength and conditioning up there. I write the programs, let him kind of do what he has to do and manipulate them. And I trust him. It's delegating. And it's really allowing yourself to let go. So letting go was a huge thing and opening up. Number 2, when I was young, 26, and opened up, I wanted to do everything right. I got to program everybody. I got to train everybody. Nobody's as good as me as a coach. Oh, there's a lot of good coaches out there, and a lot of good coaches that are better than me, you know, and you see that, and you have to learn from that, and you have to take that, I wouldn't say arrogance, but the assurance of how good of a coach you are, and realize there's a lot of good coaches out there, and you better hire good coaches and hire coaches that can fill gaps for you, that can fill your weaknesses. Never hire, you know, same strengths as yourself. So
Hiring multiple Brads. I'm sure your wife would just want there to just be one Brad in the world.
Yeah. I'm a pain in the butt for her for most of the time.
But then also it goes back to like, well, why do you hire multiple other coaches if you're just gonna like hold their hand through everything or not even let them do all that stuff? And it's like you bring them on for a reason, you know. And and like looking back, I guess like now that I'm full time, where I interned way back when, you know, 5 years ago. And it's just like they let me kind of do all that stuff, you know, but it's like they had walked me through our classes, you know, and then I had the programs, and then I had to go through sessions explaining my private programs and stuff like that. And it's just like, dang, like I did a lot on my own, right. You know, I'd earned that right. Yep. But it's just like, imagine if I had just done their programs and their programs and their programs, and then it just turns into like this echo chamber of, you know, Tommy or Steve at the top of TC Boost. And I was actually chatting with Steve about this yesterday, about how like it's interesting having been at TC Boost not for the longest period of time, because before it's just the summers, on how like all of our own experiments and speed and plyos and agility and stuff kind of influence everyone else, and how like we'll kind of go through waves of like we're all doing similar type stuff. Like we went over speed on our 1080 sprint in a staff meeting. And then like in our subsequent training sessions, there was a lot more overspeed in our private sessions, you know, and then we got a Nord board, and then a lot more people were hopping on and doing Nordic curls in general and stuff like that. And then in the fall, Steve and I were kind of going through this like intervention-based kind of individualized sprint, individualized drill, sprint, individualized drill. And then like now, because we all have kind of bigger group sizes, we have 2 big jump stretch bands together because it's 6 feet apart, but it's still partners. And like now we're kind of all messing around, see what we can do with the bands. And it's interesting kind of how everyone has their own spin, because they have the ability to do so. And
Right.
everyone kind of observes because we're all going at the same time. And then we
Well,
kind of
I think
all,
that,
yeah,
yeah, well, I think it's important, right? We all have anybody that's coaching at the levels you guys are coaching or that we try to get to in coaching. If we're getting in and getting that quality out of the athlete that we want, whether that's speed, power, speed, strength, whatever the quality is, right? There's many ways to skin a cat to get the same quality. The question is, can you defend that quality if you're asked, right? Which I think is really important. If I see something a little goofy, I'll ask. I have no problem. And they'll ask me. My staff will ask me questions. You better well have a defense for what you're trying to do, and that's, I think, is really important because there's a lot of ways to get people faster, stronger, quicker, and you can't allow people to be in a box. You can't have the owner say, these are the only parameters we're in. If you step out those parameters, man, that's a warning. You got to be able to, you mentioned boxes earlier and being in that box. You got to be able to start building your own boxes and being willing to step outside the box and try new things. Because one session of trying new things isn't going to hurt the quality of that athlete, unless they get hurt, obviously, but you want to stay at some parameters. But it's not going to ruin them. Much like having a cookie one day is not going to ruin your whole nutrition for the week, right? You're not going to all of a sudden put on 10 pounds because of one cookie, right? You want to try a new cookie? Hey, have the new cookie, right? The question is, are you doing it too much? And was it the right thing? So you have to test things out. That's how science is made, right? We got to have these theories. We got to have, a question about the theory. Then we got to apply the theory and see if it works. So having owners like you do who allow that space and allow the growth of your mind and the field is hugely important. So I'm a big fan of what you guys do. And that's what we try to replicate. We want to be able to experiment. We're doing intermittent thigh pulls with the force plates. What's that going to tell us? I don't know. It's going to tell us something, but is it correlating to what we need? And we only know that if we try it. It's not going to hurt them, but we got to experiment. We got to see what's out there.
Yeah, it's not going to hurt them. It's still going to be a good stimulus. It might not be to the magnitude that you expected, but I think there's so much to be said about having this, tying this into kind of sports science. What brought us together is this like scientific method of thinking, and like I'll ask interns, I'm like, what's the scientific method? And they're like, let me like draw back to like, high school bio or whatever. Right. I'm like, have you ever grown a plant on a window, in like 5th grade or whatever? Yeah. It's like, okay, you have different amounts of sun, different seeds, and then you take a ruler and you measure it, and then you write it down, and then you figure out that's literally like science, Mm-hmm. So you have this idea with rationale, you should be able to talk through why it makes sense, why you tweak it like this instead of that. And it's been interesting now that we have some interns and they'll ask me what seems like really basic questions. I'm just like, it's pretty good that I do have like an explanation for that, because that'd be weird if I was like, I don't know, just cause.
Yeah, because why not?
But you have this and also if someone's a little bit older or in research, kind of go through a research study in your head. What's your intro and rationale? What are your methods? Like, how would you replicate that or describe the instructions to another coach? Yeah. How are you writing down those numbers? What numbers are you specifically looking at? What do the numbers say? And like, kind of, what's the point? How do we apply it? Like, how does this make us better? And if someone can verbalize, or it would make a pretty decent piece of content, like a 5-paragraph article, just bad, going through those 5 steps, chances are you're going to have a lot more efficient of a process, and then you can help yourself and other coaches learn. So just the scientific method or scientific way of thinking, I think, is huge.
Which is a huge gap in our field. As I defend my PhD next month, it's the hardest thing for me to do. And I am a 1st-gen college kid. I tell my students who I deal with 1st-gen college kids, the hardest thing I've ever had to do is learn how to write scientifically. And, our students at SXU, they take research methods 1 and 2. We have the psych department teach it to do a phenomenal job. We teach it in 3 of our courses, how to write, because it's really important. In our field, we're either going to go to graduate school, at some capacity, whether it's for exercise science, kinesics, whatever, in that sense, or they're going to go to PT school or OT school. And it's really important they learn how to write in a scientific way where they sound intelligent, right? They can defend things, but they're in that process of critical thinking, which is different than writing for English 120, right? English 120, you're explaining things. We're writing scientifically, we're defending things. We're defending things using either a quantitative, a number, or some sort of qualitative kind of ideology with a way of disseminating that information. And it's really important. It's really a hard change for them to go to summarize this article and it blah, blah, blah. It's one paragraph to no, scientifically, summarize this article, right? And then you're teaching them. And I always tell students, like, when I correct you guys, it's not me being mean, right? And I'll pull up one of my first dissertation I put up. I'll put that up and they'll see all the red marks, and they'll see comments like, you better learn how to write better or you ain't going to pass. I wouldn't say that's a good constructive criticism, but I just show them it. Like, I didn't just come out of grad school and learn how to write. It took me a long time to write like this. And I'm not even that good yet, and it takes thousands of hours of practice. And that's a huge gap in our education system of teaching how to write.
Definitely. And having that background and experience, you can then take it and like really apply it and kind of bridge that gap between like the super kind of hoops to jump through.
Right.
Kind of.
Red tape.
But then also, like, how does it make you better day in and day out as a practitioner? So I think that it's an awesome background and I'm grateful for it. But it's cool that you've been able to share that with your students. And I'm sure that we could go on and on and on about your background, but hopefully that touched on kind of the beginning.
Yep.
So let's kind of get to the middle. What is the coolest story thus far in your career? So if you had to tell just one, what would it be?
That's a tough one. I'll go to a athlete named Olivia Burgal. All right. Olivia Burgal she is a phenomenal athlete. I had her in Florida. She was a great soccer player. She did a cardinal sin one game playing against the rival, sprinting for a ball, and she saw her teammate out of the corner of her eye. And instead of running through the ball or tailing off, she decelerated, blew out her ACL. Now, she just received a scholarship offer from North Carolina, the mecca at that time of soccer, phenomenal soccer program. Hard worker. She comes to the gym, after the surgery, and she tells me that they took away the scholarships. She's kind of devastated. So we go through the rehab protocol. We get her back ready to go. She gets an opportunity to go to Florida State and walk on. 3 years later, she's the captain of Florida State's soccer team, playing North Carolina in the national championship game and gets the game-winning assist. That, to me, not only shows like what our field is, right, and how it can come full circle with this immediate high of getting that scholarship offer, the immediate low of blowing out the ACL and this traumatic thing, and what do I do, and how do I kind of process this at 17, 18 years old? And as a strength coach, again, these relationships you forge and build allow us to have these deep conversations. And God, I've seen numerous athletes cry and get very disappointed and not know how to pull themselves out. And it's our job to pull them out of that valley and try working them back up that mountain to peak performance. And watching her go through that and watching her on TV and getting that phone call, hey, thanks, coach, I appreciate it. Awesome. And that was, God, how long ago? Maybe 5-6 years ago, and I get a phone call from her dad 2 weeks ago saying, hey, I sent you something in the mail. Right. And I was like, all right, cool. So she says, man, I still talk to Olivia to this day. We're really good friends. She's in PA school right now. She played some pro soccer. She sent me her game worn boot from the championship game, and that's cool. As a coach, I mean, that goes right in my office at the university. But it means so much more than, ooh, I won a national championship. That's great. And I've gotten rings from universities I've worked at, but the story behind that shoe, really cool. Ironically, it's the same foot that she tore the ACL on. So, you look at that stuff, and our job is so much more than pushing numbers, pushing weight, and seeing their work in the weight room. It's the talks, it's the relationships, it's the ability to foster something outside of what their parents can do and what their coaches do. I often tell my coaches we can't always be the hammer, right? Because they get hammered by their parents for being successful, their coaches on the field. Sometimes we got to be that person that puts an arm around them and cares for them and shows some empathy and understanding. Whether it's having an athlete walk in the door, start crying and say, hey, what's wrong? Let's go talk. And their dog died there earlier that week or whatever, to somebody having a devastating injury, to somebody losing a father, parent, whatever. And we're there, and we're more than, pushing numbers again and writing things down on a piece of paper and saying, let's go, So I think that just really came full circle and showing me how relationships really build to the success of the athlete and to yourself as a coach.
I remember you telling that story in person when I came and visited a few weeks ago. I got the shirt.
There it is. Yeah,
got it on. And I had the same reaction. So super cool and crazy story. And there's two things that I mainly took away from that. And the first is like, whenever you guys talk on the phone, you're not going to talk about what percentage her back squat got back up to, or how much more range of motion, or just how sucky a workout was. It's like,
Yeah.
we did it, the shoe and all this stuff. And like the last thing is the numbers, even though that's what we're like paid to do,
Right.
And then the second part of that is like, and this is something I've been chatting about with Steve, is like, where do we really play into this like training, becoming better at sport process?
Mhm.
And chances are she was a stud soccer player, or she was a stud soccer player before she came to you,
Mhm.
and
Yep.
chances are if she could have gone to any other PT, she would have returned, maybe not to the level that she returned, but she would have returned eventually. But it's those conversations on turning it instead of an anger story into this like kind of triumph, hopeful, you got this is going to be awesome story. And kind of as you ended that story on just the journey that you went on with her, and how it wasn't about getting back at UNC, or it wasn't about, oh, I was robbed, or whatever it may be, but changing the story she was telling herself about her injury,
Mhm.
and those are things that you're not going to have a class about. Well, maybe if it's one of your classes, but
We talk a lot about it. I actually use her story as I wrote for one of my PhD courses. I did her whole needs analysis, whole thing, all 37 pages of it, and it was a return to play protocol. And I use that in my class for measurement evaluation. I use it for strength and conditioning program design. I use that because it's a really good thing of all the stuff we did to prepare her for that. At some point, we have to look at it and go, did we prepare her enough for that deceleration? What gap did I miss, right? Like, holy cow, like that's not supposed to happen, because she did all this stuff. And it's also, allowing them to go through the grieving process. Hey, snap out of it. You'll be fine. You can't do that. Let them cry. Let them go through the anger, as you mentioned. Yeah, of course she was angry. She couldn't believe it. She couldn't believe it. It was a wet night at that soccer game when she tore her ACL. She knew better. But as an athlete, she's competitive. So you have to allow her being angry at herself, at the sport, at having surgery. And then you go through the denial. I can't believe it happened, whatever. And you gotta go through it, and that's just how it is. And you got to be there and listen, be a good listener.
So believe it or not, I might not be the best athlete in the world. I might have walked on D2, and I've never had a Power 5 ACC scholarship pulled from me. But I really like how you finish it up. It's like sometimes you just got to let it suck, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can't just be like, oh, you'll be fine, or like, screw those guys. It's like, no, like you worked hard, you earned it, now it's gone, So like this is going to hurt for a few weeks, and I'm going to let you do your thing,
Yeah.
But, whenever it's your opportunity, listening for the right moment. And
Yep.
just having that connection to where they feel comfortable crying, expressing their anger, and then consequently you build up that trust for when you say, hey, like that's in the past, okay, what are we going to do now? Then they're completely bought in, as
Right.
opposed to trying to rush it and being like, oh, you're just being dramatic, or it was going to be gone anyways. There's two different ways that you can kind of handle that. So
Right.
there's so many things that like truly do go beyond. And then going back to what I said about like, where do you fit in this training process, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of cool stuff kind of coming out of that story. It was just as cool the second time around.
Yeah, it always gives me goosebumps, and she calls me. We talk, like I said, we talk often. She was in town about a year and a half ago, and we met up, downtown, because she was there with her significant other, and it was cool. We always stay in touch, and it's so. I mean, a lot of my athletes, I stay in touch. I think it's important. But to your point, you also got to know when to turn that story into a motivational part. And I think that's the tricky part. Being in the field a long time, you kind of know where to take that anger and that denial and that being upset, and learning how to say, okay, now we got to turn that, and we got to start looking at, where's my next goal? How do we get you to that? Because I've had opposite stories of that. I had an athlete that tore her ACL very similar to hers, that lost her scholarship to University of Miami and then we found out that the doctor put her ACL in wrong, and she was over with. She was done. She didn't want to play anymore. So there's that other side. You can't beg people to play a high level sport. You can't. And I'll never forget that story. Sitting there watching her run and going to her mom, hey, I think we need to go to the doctor. Why? And she's just not running right. X months post-op, and she's just not running like the other girls that are preparing. And so we went in and they put it in wrong. Doctor made a mistake. And she's a senior. And, what do? She decided, hey, I had a great run. I was part of the Orlando development program, and I'm done. So, and you got to let them do that. You can't beg, because again, it's not about you as the coach. It's about them and their own journey and story. You just you're a small spoke in that wheel of their life. Yeah, be an important one, but you got to let them. I remember sitting her in the foyer of our office and her crying, just saying, I can't believe it's over. Like, I'm done. And then you had the opposite of Olivia saying, I ain't done. I'm going to go back and use that as the kind of the fire, to motivate me. So you get both ends, and both are great kids. Both are very successful. One's a physical therapist and the other one's going to be a PA. So they're going to have to draw a lot on their experiences as athletes.
Yeah. And going back to kind of what you said about having that, or being that very small but important spoke. And it's just like, you're just like that guy. You just nudge them a little bit one way or a little bit the other way, and if you listen and you have all those important pieces of information, then you know when to nudge, when to not, when to say something, when to motivate, when to draw a little bit more, also when to pull back, so there's so much to be said about just being a human, listening, and then just being a good practitioner, I guess. So very cool.
Absolutely.
So that was kind of the middle-ish.
Yep.
And then let's get kind of towards the end. So thus far, what is the story you're kind of most proud of? So the biggest kind of full circle payoff, kind of looking back in retrospect, you're like, that was pretty sweet.
I have two. I'll give you both of them quickly. I had an intern that turned coach, that turned one of my head coaches named Derek Baker. Back in a long time ago. Great coach, phenomenal strength and conditioning coach. He worked for me when I opened up my business the first time from Iowa, and came to me and, got to trust him, ran my stuff when I went to Florida before I closed it all off. And then, he opened up his own company, and I 100% support him. Phenomenal strength coach. We talk often, and little do you know the impact you have on somebody's life, which I think is really important. We were just talking about shoes for things. I was joking around with him saying, man, I've never had a pair of Jordans, and, he goes, oh yeah, that's crazy being from Chicago. How do you not have a pair of Jordans, So again, I get this thing of, hey, check your mail. And there's a book bag, a box, pair of Jordans, and he just said, hey man, this is not even comparison to what you've done for me for my career as a mentor, as somebody that let me, let my wings go and give him that outside box to experiment, to be a coach, to be a leader. He's super successful, trains hundreds of NBA guys, NBA D-League guys, great coach. And that's where it comes full circle. That's where the impact you have on the kids, 100%. But when you forge good coaches, you forge good leaders, that impact grows to children and athletes tenfold. Because my mentorship to him that he found so important, that who would have known at 26 and 27, that you're having an impact on somebody for his next 10, 12 years. How many kids has he trained with that perspective? I still see some of my old stuff in my programming that he uses to this day, which is awesome. And your coaching tree is so, so important, because we all have them. When your interns leave you, that's part of your coaching tree. They're representing you wherever they go. And that's how I've looked at it. And it's like, would I be proud of him if I walked in his facility and watched him coach? Would he be proud of me if he walked, looked at me through the doors of St. Lawrence, or me teaching through the walls of St. Xavier? And I think that just comes full circle. His thank you was, that's cool. Another cool thing is every time I write a letter of recommendation for a student and they get into the school of their choice, or they get a job in their career, that is awesome. The little impact you think you have as an instructor or advisor, because I advise all of our students, again, pales in comparison to when I see an email that comes by. I just had a great student, Caitlin Cooper. I said, how's things going? Just checking in with her. And she's like, I just want to say thank you. I got into the OT school that I wanted to get into. I just can't believe how much, this has helped me get into school. So thank you. It's little things like that. The impact you have on a moment of time with one of your student athletes, one of your interns, can shape the way their whole career goes. And that's why you have to be really, really conscious of leaving your personal stuff at the door, come in with the right attitude every day at work, And, and that hasn't been for me the whole time. There's days I've had to apologize to staff for being too hard on them or coming out with some fiery stuff, or apologize to an athlete. Sorry, I jumped on you too hard. I shouldn't have done that. And that's learning, getting older. But it's every time you have a talk with somebody, or you're influencing an athlete on a rep, set, form, or talking to an intern, it's impact. Impacts build up. Impacts build up over time. So it's just it was a great reminder, a full circle, and on so many things that encompasses where our field is right now, private sector versus public sector, and just the amount of impact you can have at any moment, at any time that you don't even know.
Awesome. And first question, the first one that came up, what kind of Jays were they? Because I'm from Chicago and I used to be in the shoe game. So
that I will show you. Hold on one second.
Sure.
Do I have them here? Yeah, I have them here. You could tell me.
All right.
There you go.
Oh, you got 11s.
Yes. Well,
dang, those are clean, icy. That's what we call in the bottom. Super nice, icy.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, those are icy. Dang.
They'll never go on my feet. One, I'm not good at basketball, but two, they mean more to me than a gym shoe. It's kind of the epitome of career.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
If anyone else is kind of in the shoe game, if I had one pair of shoe that I could put in a glass box, it'd be Bel Air 5s. So you kind of have to know shoes, but super cool.
Yeah.
And those, so you should text him and say, hey, these are still super icy, and see what he says.
I told him right away. I was like, man, I ain't never putting them on.
Yeah. Next thing is kind of just those little gifts in general, and Steve always jokes that kind of over the summer when I was looking for jobs and I was one foot in, 1 foot out at TC Boost, but I wanted to be this, big sports science college pro guy. And I'm coaching a lot of youth and middle school classes because, I've been at school every other year. So I'm just there for the summer. So I get a lot of the classes. And little 10-year-old Rory gave me this gift, just like in the middle of the summer, and then it was this joke that like the Grinch's heart softened, and it's just like Rory's just in this class, and I'm doing a good job, I think, but like you truly do never know what impact you are having, and another example was a high schooler who recently stopped coming to the class just because high school sports picked back up, and the mom emailed me and said, like, you really get teenagers, because she's had some really like doozy coaches before. And then in my mind, I'm just like, well, as a staff, we always talk about the experience and the impact and like connecting beyond just the sport, but it is cool to receive those affirmations that you are doing a good job, like you weren't mentoring him for the Jordans, right? I wasn't doing it for that little gift or for that email, but it is super cool to sit back and reflect, and like, maybe I am on the path that I think I am, or I am having that impact that I think I am. So it's super cool when you do receive those kind of affirmations. And then on the rec letters, kind of the last part that you talked about, sometimes when you're a little bit too hard on them or stuff like that. And this is another question that Steve, the wizard, always asks a lot, is like, who do they need me to be right now? Right? Yeah. Or how are they about to experience me when I walk through the door? But how do they need to experience me? And it's definitely a hard question to ask, when I come home from coaching 6 hours straight and I'm like, well, how are my parents about to experience me?
Right.
Yep. And that's just a super simple reminder about like, yes, we're not perfect and life happens and life is hard, et cetera, but if you can give yourself that little reminder, and then that just raises that impact from like this big to this big,
Yes.
And then that week goes from that big to that big, and it's just like super impactful to be conscious of like, who do they need me to be, how can I empower them, et cetera. So those were just some of the things that I got from your stories.
Yeah. It's amazing working at a university that, one, is so diverse, two, deals with first-gen kids like I was. And I have no qualms being transparent about my rough first year in college and not knowing what to do, and how I bounced back and waited 10 years before I went for my master's, because I'm not a typical academic. I'm not a career, scholar, as somebody say. I'm a real life guy that still coaches and still is, a practitioner, that I'm not flashy in my PowerPoints. I'm not captain lecturer, but I'll sit down with them and tell them, this is what I need from you. It's setting expectations. And that goes within strength and conditioning, to your employees or your coworkers, whoever you're leading, and to your students. Setting expectations so if they don't meet them, they know where they stand. But being transparent about your own story is really, I ain't the best strength coach, right? I'm not the worst. I'm not the best. I'm not the best professor, not the worst. But I can tell you what, I'll always be empathetic. I'll always listen, and I'll always try to do right by my students or athletes or coaches. That's all I can ask for.
And there's no way I could try to rephrase that to do that justice that you just did. So we will get to the last question.
Yep.
So if there was one question that the listener can ask themselves either on a daily or weekly basis, just for self-reflection, check-in, there's something simple that they can just write down, a simple reminder. So one question they can ask themselves to continue becoming better, what would that be?
Did I give 100% today? Can you look in the mirror and not, we don't do it every day. So it's not like, man, I did great today. It's not one of those things. The self-reflection that is so popular right now, and which it should be. It's a daily reflection of, how did I do today? How did I do? Was I at 100%? Did I get to the athletes like I should? Did I teach 100%? There's some days I walk out of St. Lawrence walls and I go, man, that wasn't that great of coaching today. It wasn't good. It wasn't good. I had X on my mind, or been something else is going on, or it's been, yeah, I think we got those kids today. I think we did. I think my staff did a great job. Did I teach well today? Man, I don't know. That wasn't that great of a lecture, So then it's rehashing, and it's making these little marks, because it allows you to put stuff down that you can improve on, which I don't think we do enough to ourselves. I don't think we set our own expectations. We like having people set expectations for us, because we like to achieve something. A lot of us are achievers, or check mark guys or girls, right? We have to start doing that for ourselves. We have to have our own expectations, or else other people's expectations don't matter. Because then we're being who they want us to be. You got to be who you want to be. And it's tough. I have, very young staff, and I often ask my staff, what do you want to do in 5 years? Where do you want to be? And I don't know. You got to start having some expectations for yourself. Can't live in a world of stagnant. You can't be stagnant water. Stagnant water is never good to drink, right? You got to always be fresh. You always got to challenge yourself. Man, it can only come from internally, and that's what I tell my students, like, your motivation, your intrinsic drive, I can't do anything about that. I can externally motivate you. Good grades, great bench press, good squat. Those are all external motivators. They have to find it within themselves. And when they do, and they get that fire, you get to see the success, whatever that success may be. It might be just making the varsity team. Some of the greatest athletes I've trained that are the most fun have just made the varsity team. That's cool. That's their goal. That was their motivation. I played one game of football in my high school career. We all have those athletes. We know they're not going to be D1 athletes. So once you see that fire lit, generally speaking, those external motivators are met with high expectations, and they're completed. But you got to have those conversations of what internally drives you. And that's something you ask yourself every day. Did I give 100%? If somebody was grading me right now, did I do right? Did I do good? And if not, how do you fix it? What didn't you do? I think that's really important.
Mm-hmm. And that's understanding that not every day is going to be 100%. But
right.
If you're honest enough with yourself to say, no, I was not, but I'm aware enough to realize when it was 95, or what I can do better next time. And then consequently adding on the second part of your answer about, like, did I give 100% to help me get to where I want to go?
Right.
And that's not to say that, like, in one day of giving 100%, you're going to earn that scholarship, right?
Right.
But did I do everything I could today to help me get to where proverbially I want to go?
Right.
And it's super simple. And that's kind of the Hawthorne effect. I'll make it sciencey.
Yeah.
Just the fact that you're being evaluated, or you will, it's going to or you're being observed. Like, just that we have a Nord board in our facility, hamstring strength has gone up. Because we know it's being measured.
Right.
At the end of the day, you're going to ask yourself, there's a sticky note on your mirror. Did I give 100% today? Chances are it's just going to elevate everything.
Absolutely. And it's important. It's important for young coaches to realize that. And I didn't learn that till late in the game, and it's just something I think is really important for these young students that I have that they're about to embark on finishing education, whether graduating this year, or these student athletes that haven't competed in a year and about to compete on Monday. And, the built up anxiety, the built up, all this frustration they've had of sitting on the sidelines for a year, are they going to perform what they think they're going to perform on that Monday night when they tip off? That's crazy, right? Now I had to tell the head coach, man, like you got to understand these kids haven't competed in a year. He's a brand new head coach, phenomenal head coach. And he's like, yeah, I didn't think about that. I'm like, they're going to be very anxious to get out there and prove. You got to learn as the coach when to take that down, when to raise it up. And again, understand your athletes' intrinsic motivators. We give a survey to all of our athletes at St. Lawrence at the beginning of the year about, are they, external guys? Are they internal? What drives them to be good athletes? It's really important. We take stock. That's how we get the foundation of the relationship. Making sure they're okay. Asking kids every morning we roll in here. First thing I ask my kids, how you doing today? How's your week going? Feeling good today? Feeling good today? Absolutely. When they leave, have a great practice, have a great day at school. It's starting the day off with a positive attitude, ending it with a positive attitude, and not mentioning the work that happened in between those hours. Because it's not about that. It's not about that. Setting them up for a tone of the day, because we see them first. That tone has to be met all the way through the day. Ending that hour session or hour and a half, how long they're ever with us, with that same tone of have a great day, man. Be a good student athlete today. Stuff like that. So it's important.
And the foundation of that relationship or the foundation of that day, it's a simple question.
Yep.
You can't give them all the answers, but you can guide them that way with certain questions,
Absolutely.
So I'm sure we could go on and on for 2 hours like we did the first time we chatted, but those are some awesome stories. Thank you for your transparency and being open. And now I'm opening up the floor, rolling out that red carpet for you to plug whatever you want to plug. Where can we get more of you, et cetera, et cetera?
I'm a very simple man on social media. So I usually am on Instagram at PrimetimeSP21. I tell people always follow our guys, John Valeni at JV, Valeni. St. Lawrence is St. Lawrence Vikes are great to follow as well. They do great stuff with education. Adversity Volleyball, it's at Adversity VB. We do a lot of work with them too. And at my university, SXU, we have a phenomenal education that we really drive for the student success. So that's it. Not a big plug guy. One thing I will say that's really helped me over the last 5-6 years, and particularly these last two, are things like Brett Bartholomew's stuff with his new stuff like Blind Spot or Valued. And I can't echo enough to never underestimate yourself and follow people who you want to be mentored by, and never be afraid to reach out, ever. Simple DM can make great connections, right? And I can tell you, weird, right? And I'm really good friends with like Jim Calbasso. I'm on the board at the IYCA. They will never, really good coaches, really good people will never deny a response. So just remember that to the young coaches out there, to the athletes. You want to be mentored by somebody, you got to reach out to them. You can't just follow them on Instagram or Facebook or any other social media platform. Ask questions, always be inquisitive, and always be a lifetime learner.
Fantastic. So thank you very much for your time. I'm looking forward to our next chat. And awesome, this was sweet.
I look forward to being up at TC Boost pretty soon.